Hey you all, Farmer Jesse here. Welcome to the NoTill Market Garden Podcast, episode 29, season 2, and what an episode it is. I spoke with Doug Wolcik of Gaining Ground in Concord, Mass. about the operation he helps run up there. It is a nonprofit farm that relies heavily on volunteers, so we get into the profoundly complicated management of that. That is getting a bunch of people with very little, if any, gardening experience, respectfully, to accomplish a lot of work correctly. We also talk about distribution of food, which they give all their food away, how they manage that, and of course, soil management practices and some of the research that's being done on the farm about no-till. We also get into setting up hedgerows, get real technical on mobile tunnels, and a whole lot else. It was super fun to have this conversation, and I'm excited to bring it to you, but we could not bring it to you without the help of our show sponsors like Farmers Web.
Farmers Web software makes it easier for your farm to manage working with your buyers. By lessening the administrative load and increasing efficiency, Farmers Web helps you save time, reduce errors, and work with more buyers overall. Our free account includes features to manage your real-time and coming soon product availability, and tools to create your own availability calendar to inform buyers on the seasonality of your products. The free account also includes access to the Farmers Web Guide to Working with Wholesale Buyers, which offers pro tips and best practices on how to work with restaurants, schools, and other similar buyers. A 1-month free trial is available of the paid account, which includes features to manage your customers and orders, give select buyers special pricing and payment terms, track your buyers' payments, send invoices, keep detailed sales records, and much more. You can even manage orders for buyers who don't place them online. Access a demo video and learn more at farmersweb.com.
Also supporting the show today, BCS America.
BCS two-wheeled tractors are often referred to as the best tiller on earth, which makes sense given that the rear-tine tiller is our most popular attachment. Recently, a growing number of folks have begun to see till as a dirty word. No-till and low-till methods certainly have their benefits, but the BCS tiller attachment has a new trick up its sleeve for growers that are concerned with inverting soil layers or over-pulverizing their soil. The Precision Depth Roller accessory, or PDR, is now available for 30-inch BCS tillers, and a 26-inch version will be available in early 2020. The PDR gives BCS owners precise control over the depth at which they engage their soil, from half an inch up to 7 inches deep in half-inch increments, perfect for mixing in soil amendments while chopping up any leftover plant residues. And the PDR's expanded mesh roller gently levels the soil, leaving behind a perfect seedbed. The PDR is on sale now. Check out bcsamerica.com for sale pricing and to find your nearest dealer.
Big thanks to our show sponsors. I also want to say before we get going that I know coronavirus has anxiety really high right now for everyone in the farming community and otherwise. I know because our farm is feeling it too, but keep your heads up, y'all. Communicate with your customers. Let them know you will have good, nutritious food all season and that you will figure out a way to get it to them. It may be a rough year, but be positive. Remember that we're not in the worst industry. People need healthy food. You need healthy food. Take care of yourselves. Get rest. Turn off Twitter sometimes. I'm talking to myself really right now. I'm going to obviously keep posting these podcasts so everyone can keep learning, keep improving, and farm on. All right, enough from me. Let's have a nerdy farm escape, shall we? Here's my conversation with Doug Wolcik of Gaining Ground. Doug Wolcik, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Jesse. Thanks so much for having me. It's an honor to be on here with you.
And it's an honor to have you. Well, let's start with the rundown. Where is Gaining Ground located? How much land are you working with there? And those sorts of things.
So Gaining Ground is located in historic Concord, Massachusetts. That's about 15 miles west of Cambridge and Boston. We're a nonprofit. 100% of the food we grow is donated to local area hunger relief organizations. Currently, we're partnering with 13 different organizations in Greater Boston, all within 20 miles of the farm. Food is donated 3 days a week, beginning in April through the end of December. 12 of the organizations we are partnering with are a mix of food pantries, shelters, and meal programs, and they're serving a huge variety of people. And the 13th organization we partner with is the Boston Area Gleaners, an amazing organization doing food rescue plus delivery all throughout the state. So for growing, we cultivate just under 3 acres, all in diversified vegetables. We grow over 40 different food crops, veggies, herbs, fruits, plus we do cut and dry flowers. We also do a large perennial culinary herb garden. And over the last 4 years, we've been integrating hedgerows all throughout the farm that have, small and large fruits that we're hoping to get a harvest off of in a few years. And those are all interplanted with beneficials and natives and drought-tolerant plants. We have a very typical market garden layout. We have 20 field blocks, 10 blocks with 18 beds, and another 10 blocks with 12 beds. All our bed lengths are 80 feet long, and all the beds are, 30-inch beds, 18-inch pathways, which is the perfect bed size for our volunteers that we get on the farm. They're, all ages and all shapes and sizes. We have over a half acre under cover. We have 3 high tunnels and 1 rolling tunnel, which is just over 10,000 square feet in production. And then we have another 12,000 square feet of the Farmer's Friend caterpillar tunnels in production. And of course, these structures, we love them because they give us an additional 2 months of production each year. So for staffing, and we have a huge volunteer program. So currently on staff, we have a staff of 5, very skilled and experienced farmers, plus myself. In addition to the farm crew, we also host and work alongside 2,500 volunteers from the start of April up until Thanksgiving. So these volunteers can sign up online, and they work with us in blocks. They work from 9 to 12 in the morning or 1 to 4 in the afternoon. And this volunteer program is managed intensively by my assistant manager, so that we're really pairing who's coming to the farm with the appropriate day, and so that they have the appropriate, really meaningful work. Some days we have 1 individual volunteer. We just integrate them in with the crew, and some days we have a class of 30 second graders. We work with, it's a huge part of our day-to-day task is integrating everybody who steps onto the farm into the most meaningful and appropriate task. We never have busy work for them, and I think it's a real benefit to us and to the farm, because we love the volunteer program, because in so many ways it's forced us to develop these extremely efficient systems for each and every task, so that when you're working with these folks who may have never stepped on a farm before, tasks are very clearly explained and defined. And in so many ways also it's made me a better grower, because I'm forced to think through every step of every job on the farm and how it can be improved and how it can be better explained to the volunteers, so that in the end we get the results we want, plus they get a really unique, great experience.
Yeah, that's so many good things in there. Let's just stick with the volunteer stuff while we're talking about it now. I think that amount of volunteers has to have some kind of serious logistics behind, managing them, like you said. Can you talk a little bit about what that looks like?
Yep. So we're open Tuesday through Saturday. We'll take volunteers. Anybody and everybody can sign up. If you're an individual, you can just, look at the calendar, see if a date or block is open, and you can just put yourself into that block. If you're coming with a group, 2 or more people as a family, maybe a school group, a church group, a corporate group, you have to send a request. My assistant manager then receives the request, and we'll look at our week schedule, what we have going on that week, and then we'll just line them up with the most appropriate block with the most important task that we have for that week to do with them. So they come out to the farm, they arrive, say they're doing the morning block, they arrive at 9 o'clock in the morning, they're greeted by one of the farmers. We kind of rotate that chore. If they haven't been here on the farm before, we give them a brief introduction, tell them about the farm, what we do, why we're doing it, how we're doing it. And then we get started with them. We integrate them, right into the most important job. Typically, if it's a large group, we'll split them up because it's so much easier to work with 5 people than 20 people. So we'll take out, say it's 20 people came to the farm, 5 of us will be working with them. We'll each take a group of 4 out to an area of the farm. Say we're doing a bed turnover, I'll get them to that field block. I'll, do another introduction while we're over at the field block and kind of verbally explain the task that we're going to do. Then I will physically show them the task, what we're going to do, and tell them what's the best way ergonomically to hold their bodies, what's the most efficient way to, say, remove the spinach crop that we're removing, or whatever the task may be. And then we'll just integrate them into the job. At the same time that we're working, I sort of expect my farmers to keep our farmers' pace while they're doing the task, but at the same time, you're kind of watching the volunteers, make sure that they're doing it, correctly, not pulling the plant instead of the weed. So you're kind of checking back in on them and kind of working at the same time, and then just, if you see them doing something wrong, we just kind of nudge them, say, hey, from experience, we've tried it this way and it seems to work great, and that seems to be a positive way to to get the results that we want. And at the same time, our passion, all the farmers are so passionate about what we're doing, the no-till, the hunger relief aspect of the farm. We're able to have this conversation with all the volunteers in the farm and explain our systems, that we've thought about this project for all winter long, and we're now just implementing the project. People start to get really excited about it. They understand it, and then we just complete the task with them, and we just have these amazing conversations in the field with everybody's there, and it's amazing what we get done. I mean, compared to a lot of other farms, when we have 20 adults come out for 3 hours, it seems like we get a week's worth of work done in 3 hours.
Yeah, that's so cool. I love hearing how well that is managed, and also the approach you take in talking to your volunteers and training them. I think that's super cool. So in order to do that, you have to basically have your entire garden week set out before the week starts. Is that kind of, so every week you kind of know more or less what you're doing every day, and then that way, like you said, you kind of fit each group into each slot based on what you have going on?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So I pretty much spend the whole winter planning the whole season out week by week. So we even, because we're getting requests now for April, May, so we need to know pretty much what we're doing every day of the year in February. And as in farming, you start to see the seasonality of everything, and you're like, oh, last year on this time we were harvesting sweet potatoes, and we're doing it again. It's a huge cycle on a huge calendar. This is my 8th year here, so it's getting more and more predictable. But each winter we take the time to make sure we 100% have everything planned. And we plan for more for week by week in the winter. We know this is what needs to happen this week in the summertime. This is our seeding list for the week. This is our planting list for the week. And then on Monday, before volunteers start on Tuesday, we kind of just mix and match with who's coming when and who will be good at what task. And then we kind of lay out the week on Monday. But we have already known since the winter what we were going to do that week. And then, like I said, Monday morning, we'll make that plan for what day we're going to do it with them.
And then are you just using spreadsheets to keep track of all that, or is there a special program that you've adapted?
So originally, maybe 3 years ago, we were doing it all on different Excel spreadsheets. And 2 years ago, I started using the 10 software program. which I love. Huge advocate for it. It's the way it's laid out is the way my mind works, so I would put a big plug in for Tend. It's incredible. It lays everything out beautifully. I'm able to share it with the whole farm crew. It makes everything predictable, easy to find. It's all in one place rather than opening up all these different tabs and different documents and different Excel sheets. So we have fully committed to Tend, and I think it's a great resource because it keeps every year's information. So now we have that as kind of a record keep too.
That's cool. Yeah, it's cool to hear that about Tend because it's not one that we've talked about on the podcast, but it's definitely one that I know people are interested in. Talk a little bit about your history. How did you come to gaining ground, and then what were you doing? What was kind of your road into agriculture, or did you have a history with it?
So growing up, I had no history with it. I started landscaping the end of high school. I worked for like an artisanal landscape designer, so we were doing like really beautiful edible gardens, ornamentals, tree work. It was all, sorry, I'm blanking on the word here. It was all installation, so it was all planting work. So we would work directly with the designers and we would implement the design. So I was kind of floating around, I didn't really have direction, didn't go to college, kept doing that, as a seasonal job, and 2 years into it, I really discovered how much I loved this, but would rather grow food than these ornamental plants. So I went to the Stockbridge School at the University of Massachusetts, studied sustainable agriculture there, graduated from there while still keeping that landscape job in the summer. And after graduation, I did an internship out in Northern California on a small 5-acre family-run for-profit farm. Got some incredible experience there before coming back east for a job working with the Department of Conservation. So I landed after being in college and doing an internship in California for a year, I was pretty broke and needed a full-time, paying job. So I took a job working for the Department of Conservation in the city of Boston with the state. It was a state-run project doing invasive species identification and removal in basically the urban forest in Boston. That turned out to be a lot more desk and office work than I would have liked, so I saw an opening at Gaining Ground and applied and quit that job and have been here the last 8 years.
That's great. And then, so since you've been there, kind of how has the farming changed? Is it still kind of what it was when you arrived in terms of like, your field management, or has that changed?
Great question. I think the farm has pretty much did a complete 180 since I've been here. We were traditionally a tractor farm. We were farming all 3 acres with a tractor. And I just struggled with that. It never made sense to me to, grow something, plow down the fields, mow it. It just felt so disconnected. So in 2014, we built our first high tunnel, and in there was where we first experimented with NoTill. It was an immediate success, and because it was in production all throughout the year, we grew greens, we grew tomatoes, we grew greens again, that we just left it in permanent beds. It's when we started reading, Elliot Coleman's book, Jean Martin's book, and by 2015, so just one growing season, we had left it in permanent beds, and immediately we had like a quarter of the amount of weeds that we had in there the previous year, and the tomatoes were just killing it in there. We were harvesting more tomatoes in the hoop house than we had, double the amount of tomatoes in the field, and we were getting double the amount that were in the hoop house. So just one season, we thought, this is incredible. Why don't we have the whole farm like this? So in 2016, we had 3 acres. It was a little bit intimidating. We're thinking, how are we going to transition this whole farm into no-till? And then 2016, we just decided, let's just do 1 acre at a time. So 2016, 2017, and 2018, we just slowly transitioned 1 acre at a time. We bought the tarps, the equipment that we needed to slowly transition the farm. And it worked out great for us. We never bit off more than we could chew, and we kind of were trialing it and just saw the improvement that it made each year. So we got more and more committed to it, doing it. And since then, in 2016, we were producing about 60,000 pounds of food each season. And since switching to no-till, that last year we did 125,000 pounds of food on the same footprint. And I attribute that largely to the no-till, but also since 2014, we've had a bunch of infrastructure that we've added onto the farm. We got a grant from a foundation to put up an 8-foot tall, high tensile wire deer fence around the whole 3 acres of the farm. We got an NRCS grant that we put in a well and an irrigation system that's really efficient, and all the hydrants are, split between 2 field blocks, so it's so easy to keep everything watered. We got another foundation grant that we were able to build a rolling thunder hoop house, so that covers about 9,000 square feet. We get 3 moves a season out of it. And then last year we built 2 more hoop houses in 2019. And then 2015 we built a 30 by 72 timber framed barn that has a workshop, a farm office, a walk-in cooler. We were able to integrate a wash pack station into that barn, and that barn has completely transformed our day-to-day operations. So largely our increase in production is to the no-till, the biology in the soil, the living soil, but at the same time, we've got all these infrastructural changes that have contributed to that too, and just our, I think being in the no-till permanent beds, you get this amazing opportunity with the versatility. As soon as a crop's out, boom, another crop's in. So we didn't have that 4 years ago when we were using the tractors. We'd kind of wait for a whole field block to empty before we could bring the tractor in to disc it, to till it, to reshape the beds. So I've just found the versatility has been so amazing. And once you start to build on this, I feel like you're so in tune and you're just fine-tuning stuff instead of making big sweeping changes that we've been making for the last 3 years. Each year now we're just looking at really fine-tuning things, and we're more observant because we're not always on our hands and knees weeding anymore. We're just harvesting and seeing how quick crops are turning out, that we're able to observe that, take notes, and take those changes into next season and really tighten our gaps and tighten our successions and our turnover. So it's like a big system that just keeps building on itself and gets better and better each year.
Yeah, that's great. I love that you all went about that slowly. And, it's funny because when I decided that we were going fully no-till, I kind of came into the house and I told my wife that we were just going to sell the tractor. And she was like, yeah, okay, hold on. Let's just take it a little bit at a time. So I appreciate that. That's great. I think that's the best approach. And I also love that you spent so much time kind of talking about some of the more practical elements of it. Like, I think that's an underrated part of tillage reduction is just how much less time it takes to get from one crop to the other.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm wondering, maybe you can describe your no-till system as it is right now, and and what that looks like.
So I think we sort of follow what Jean Martin has laid out in his book, and ideally I'd like to work towards something that I think Paul and Elizabeth at Singing Frogs Farms do. Is we started off, we were broad forking every bed with a deep, heavy duty broad fork. So we break into the fields in the springtime. We remove tarps if they're not in cover crop. We put our amendments down in the springtime. Then we amend based on Logan Lab test results, where we really follow the Albrecht method of, balancing all the nutrition in the soil. I like to call it the ABCs, a bed prep. So amend in the spring, broad fork, compost. Then we add our fertility. Luckily we're not too far from Vermont, so we actually buy in compost from Vermont Compost Company. It's the compost is the base of the potting soil, but we get it trucked down in 40-yard, tractor trailers, and they just dump it on site. So we're adding about a quarter to a half inch of compost per season as needed. We did that for the first 3 years of turning everything into no-till, and now we're just focusing our compost on, trouble areas. If we don't like the physical structure of the soil, or, it's a big heavy feeder going in, we'll add the compost, and we're kind of, pulling away from using the compost because it's a lot of weight to move around the farm. And luckily for us, it's also a terrific volunteer job, filling up wheelbarrows of compost and, dumping those at the end of the bed. People can dump them into 5-gallon buckets and carry them into the bed and dump them right on the bed tops. So then we're adding our fertility. We do a custom blend down at Seven Springs. So this is based off our soil test. It's a recipe that's unique to us that we come up with each year based on those soil tests, and that's, also based on our soil test to improve our soil fertility, and it's really focusing on what our deficiencies are, and so we can get the best crop each season. And for now, we do use a BCS power harrow. I'd like to eventually work away from that, but we are still doing that every time we transition a bed over, or replant that every time in the season. We are still using the BCS. Eventually, I'd like to get to a place, I've heard that people are getting there, that they don't need to broad fork anymore. They don't need to use the BCS anymore. But for us, we're not quite there yet, but I think that's our end goal.
Yeah, that's cool. We've, with the broad forking in particular, we found that there are certain plots that don't need it anymore, that the roots and the organic matter have kind of kept the, wherever we've broad forked have kind of kept that apart. But then there are other plots I feel like are kind of ornery, and they don't seem to loosen up enough. Like I still feel a little compaction about 6 to 8 inches down, still kind of in that root zone. So we continue to do that, but I feel like it's a tool that kind of makes itself obsolete. I've said that a lot of times, but I think that's one of the important factors of using a broad fork, is that it will eventually, if you're doing it right and doing it in with the cover crops and that sort of thing, then I think it'll eventually kind of work its way out.
Hey, you all, quick interruption for me just to say thank you to everyone who supports this podcast through Venmo, which you can always kick us a few bucks over there to @NoTill Growers. If you just like a show, just say, hey man, thanks, here's a couple bucks. And you can also support us through patreon.com/farmerjesse. That's Patreon. You get discounts on events and merch and stuff over there. And at certain levels, or if you just bump up from one level to another, you get a shout out on the show. So big shout outs this week to Jordan Cooper, J.M. Fortier, Kevin Keene, Ryan Gosser, William Henpen, and Yannick LaPlante. Thank you to everyone who supports the show however you do. All right, back to Doug.
The cover crops, how are you managing those? Are you kind of crimping them, or are you mowing them, or what's your strategy there?
Yep. So we're new to experimenting with this. This is our second year doing cover crops. We're always pushing season extension because, we're not based by a market. Our food always has a home when we're working with these food pantries and shelters organizations. So we're pushing season extension as hard as we can and as deep into the New England fall as we can. So when we can, if with the crop plan, when the crop plan works out, we do an oats and peas mix that's really easy to incorporate the next spring. We can just plant right into that residue. And then, we stole some stuff from Daniel Mays of doing a rye and clover blend that we just crimp down with a board or a T-post and then put tarps on it. So Daniel suggests that the rye and the crimson clover, at least in New England, flower closer together than rye and vetch. And, vetch is a little bit more difficult to control in the no-till system. So we let the rye and clover grow up in the springtime. For us, it's around Memorial Day that will kind of just crimp it down. And that was just the farm crew kind of kicking it over, folding it over. No machinery other than a 2x4 or a T-post. And then we dragged our silage tarps over that plot and covered it from, the end of May till mid-June when we need to plant our fall brassicas up here in New England. And then we just plant it into the residue. It basically looks like a beautiful dried out, folded over stand of mulch. So we planted into that section there. So that was great because it allowed us to not have to broad fork, not have to use the BCS. We just, dug little holes, made little holes in the rye and clover and planted the plants right into that ground. And, not as weed-free as Daniel, where he said he pulled 20 weeds from a section. We, probably weeded it once or twice that season, but it was the highest yielding broccoli cabbage we've ever had for a fall stand. So that was terrific. And newly with our 10 program, they just added you can kind of drag your crops into basically your field maps, and then that's spread out over a calendar. With this new aspect of Tend, I'm able to see the holes a little bit more. So I want 2020 as a huge push of getting in a lot more spring cover crops and getting fall cover crops in as early as possible. So it's going to be a new venture for us this year, and we're really going to be intentional about it because I think we're kind of peaking out, at the amount of food that we can produce on this piece of land. So now we want to, our next thing is like real environmental and ecological farming, like making sure we're taking time in each field plot to put down cover crop to increase soil health. And because our production has gone way up, we've actually taken about 30 beds out of production this year that we're going to put in more perennials, more flowers, more hedgerows. So that integrated with the cover crop is kind of the future of this site here at Gain and Ground.
That's great. So tell us a little bit about how you've gone about those hedges so far, and in terms of like what kind of stuff that you're putting in them and those sorts of things.
So they're mixed bag. They're not on irrigation, so I went for, sort of drought tolerant stuff. I went for natives when possible, and then we've integrated, fruit trees and small fruits in between them. And this is largely based off of my landscaping background and some recommendations for, I saw Paul and Elizabeth did a intensive day-long workshop at NOFA, Mass in the winter of, I think it was 2016 or 2017, just kind of based off of their design, their suggestion. But then we, obviously translated those California plants to what we could use here in New England. So we've used all of these to break up field plots, field blocks, based on our irrigation, based on our row cover, based on our rotation needs. Eventually I'd love to have every field block, completely surrounded by hedgerows. Right now we're slowly working them in year by year. But basically what I did, they're the same length of the bed, but I would take 2 beds out of production to make 1 hedgerow. So it's 8 feet on center rather than the 4 feet on center. And we'd lay out, we're, trying to create a forest. same idea as the forest. So we're spreading out larger trees about 15 feet apart. So those kind of go on rotation. So it's a nitrogen fixing tree like a honey locust, an apple, and then a peach, pear, or plum, and then that repeats after that. So then you get back to a nitrogen fixer, back to an apple, and then whatever one you didn't do before, peach, pear, or plum. So 5 feet off of the center, in between of the fruit trees, we've done some small fruits, so blueberries, currants, gooseberries, raspberries. So we're able to get 2 of those plants in between the 15 feet spacing of the trees. And then underneath the trees, we've planted all these perennial, culinary, medicinal herbs that, everything serves a purpose in the hedgerow. It's either attracting beneficials, deterring pests. It's either a nitrogen fixer or a deep tap rooter that's mining for nutrients that, may be too deep in the soil that aren't available to the plant. So everything in the hedgerow serves a purpose. We have elder, dogwood, so they're attracting the birds. We just want them as wild, as chaotic and wild as they can be, but there's beauty to us who've laid it out, designed it, planted it, maintained it. We can see the beauty, but they kind of look like crazy little spots on the farm. But I just love them, seeing, since we've stopped using the tractor, seeing the return of the earthworms, the birds, the insects, the invertebrates, all in the hedgerows around the farm. It's so beautiful. They're quickly becoming my favorite spots on the farm.
That's great. And then are you managing them? Like, are you going and hand weeding them or cultivating them at all, or are they just kind of hanging out?
Great question. Yes, we certainly pay a ton of attention to them. And now, as we're working to our 4th year of implementing hedgerows, we're getting much smarter at it. We're laying down the cardboard in the fall. We're burying the cardboard in the fall in compost. Then the springtime we plant them and then also mulch them with wood chips. So we lease town from the land. So I have a great relationship with the operations manager of the town. So Concord has a great composting site in town. So they'll drop off compost, wood chips, leaves for me to use at the farm, pretty much whenever we call them. So then we'll wood chip everything. In the past, we were, not as planned, when we were first implementing these hedgerows. So we just got the plants in the spring, found a home for them, put them in the ground, and then that was a lot more hand weeding. But our volunteer schedule kind of works inversely than our season. We have tons of volunteers that want to come in the spring and the fall, and then it's an exodus from Concord in the summer. Everybody goes away on vacation, and that's when we're more busy. We have less volunteers. But in the fall, in the spring, when everyone has spring fever, we got 1 million people that want to come out to the farm. So in the springtime, we'll get them all set up. We'll weed them for the spring, get all the wood chips down, get them all mulched, get them all beautiful. We'll kind of take the summers off from working in the hedgerows and just focus all of our energy and the volunteer energy in the veg production fields. And then in the fall again, when we have a surplus of volunteers coming out to the farm, we'll make sure that those hedgerows are in great shape going into the next spring. So maybe like the Broad Fork, the hedgerows are kind of working themselves out of needing of maintenance each spring now, but that's fine. As we keep implementing more, we'll create more jobs to plant them, to maintain them, to wood chip them. And I think with the integration of doing the cardboard and the compost real deep in the fall, they should be a breeze to implement now.
Yeah, that's cool. That's a good system. So you're just laying down cardboard in the fall, compost over top of the cardboard, allowing that to break down, and in the spring you're planting that. That's kind of the system, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. That's super simple approach, and it sounds like you gave a fair amount of space to those trees but that you're also kind of hoping to get some amount of crop out of them, like you said, maybe a culinary herb or later on some fruit, that sort of thing. So that is something that you imagine you'll have as a marketable item.
Yep, absolutely. It's the number one requested item at the food pantries that we donate to is fruit, like more and more fruit. Now we just do strawberries and melons, but to be able to send out a crop of apples, peaches, pears, blueberries in the future would be incredible. Along with the herbs too. That would, that's the end goal.
Yeah, that's great. I love that. With the strawberries, I haven't talked to anybody about strawberries. How are you managing the strawberries? Are you leaving them in the same place for a couple of years, or are you just replanting them every season? What's that look like?
Yep. So we plant them every 3 years. Remove all the flowers the first year and expect to harvest year 2 and 3. And we're just putting them so all of our field blocks are so uniform. They have the same amount of beds. I'm just finding little triangles or corners to kind of rotate them through, or little plots that we're not taking full advantage of. That's where we'll rotate our cut flowers, dry flowers, and strawberries through. But so year 1, we'll just prep the soil. We actually lay down some landscape fabric that covers the whole entire area, path included. We'll burn out holes in them, put drip underneath, then plant the strawberries right into that landscape fabric. Grow them for the 3 years. Once we remove them, that turns into a new cut flower section. So we've planted our second planting of strawberries, so this is the first year that we'll be removing strawberries, and it'll become a new cut flower garden this year. And then we have year 2 of our next plot. So I hope to, kind of move those throughout the farm as we move forward into the future. Strawberries are new to us. I guess this would be our 4th year of growing them.
Okay, that's cool. Talk a little bit about the distribution stuff with, you mentioned those 13 organizations. How does that work on a logistical standpoint? Are they calling you and requesting certain things, or are you sending them like a fresh sheet? How does that work?
It's a great question. So what we do is constant feedback. We're always interacting with the organizations that we donate with. We give them a survey at the end of the season. What did well, what couldn't you distribute? What could you use more of? What could you use less of? What would you like to see if you could pick anything? So working with 13 different organizations, it's kind of all across the board the answers that we get to those questions. So, we still grow a diversity of crop. We have a relationship with the places that we're given to. We've been working with them, some of them for well beyond that I've been here at the farm, 15, 20 years. So we're kind of adjusting what we grow to fit their need, and just make it as best of a relationship that we can, so that there's little to no food waste. We take pride in what we're growing. We think it's extremely high quality. We want to give them the best quality so that people are excited about getting it and receiving it. But we want to grow diversity too. We want to keep the farmers' interest peaked. So, I came from a CSA farm, so we're kind of doing that model. We're growing about 40 different crops. But at the same time, we're balancing what does well for us, what does well in a no-till garden. So we're constantly reducing the amount of potatoes we grow. We're constantly increasing the amount of greens we grow, the amount of lettuce we grow, just to better serve our recipients. But at the same time, I want to keep the farmers' interest peaked, and I want, people that come and work here to get a full experience of what it's like of growing food, in New England, and have them understand what it's like to manage, harvest, seed, plan for 30 different veg crops or whatever it is. So we donate we start as early as we can and go as late as the season we can do donations. So beginning in April through the end of December, we're doing donations. At the peak of the season, it's 3 days a week. 4 organizations come per distribution day, so that's on Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. We don't deliver anything. They come with a truck or van, whatever they need to take it back to their site to do distribution. So say on a Tuesday morning, we got 4 organizations that's coming. We do rotate. One farmer's running the wash station with the help of some volunteers. We're washing, packing, weighing everything. We just record everything by weight. And we're basically quartering it roughly. The day's harvest, we basically quarter it to the 4 organizations that are coming to that day. Unless we know that one organization is double the size, then we'll kind of give them, a little bit more. But just seasonal harvest, whatever's ready that Tuesday, we harvest every crop, in the field, bring it to the wash station, process it, quarter it, get it all boxed up. Then we have 4 different tables out in front of the barn that are in the shade. The organizations come, they see a little label on the table. They know that that's their lot. It may be 10 boxes one week, it may be 25 boxes one week. They load up all the boxes into their truck, drive it back to their site, and set up for their distribution. We grow the food and they distribute it. They're great at that. We're great at growing the food, so we let them do that part. And everybody that we're distributing to, on the day that we're distributing to them is the day that their recipients are coming to pick up. So it's never going to a place and then just going into a cooler or storage. It is distributed that day. We're constantly getting new requests like, hey, we've heard about you, can you start donating to us? And we're just trying to find what's the best balance, what can we manage on the farm? Do they have a van to come pick up the food? Can they pick up on the days that we harvest and distribute? So it's a constant work in progress, and it's really great. 2 of the organizations, we do send a farmer on rotation to do the distribution. So one is on Saturday morning in Concord. We'll go to this location. Families have been, applied to be in this program. We will drive to, a location in Concord, set up what we call a free farmers market, and we know 50 families are coming, and we basically have 50 CSA, 50 shares worth of vegetables for those families to come and shop and fill up a box or fill up a bag and take what they can use for their family. And we do that again on Tuesday afternoons at a Head Start school in a city near us in Lowell. So it's an early education school for pre-K. So as the parents come to pick up their children at the end of the school or their work day, they can shop at our farmers market, and we have everything that's ready just as if it was a CSA, and we just have limits. You can have 3 peppers, 5 tomatoes, pound of greens, 3 heads of lettuce. We'll have limits on there, and then kind of pick and choose what they want to take for that week. And that's 40 families on that day.
Okay, so in terms of revenue generation, you're not selling any of that produce. That's all donated, right? Do I have that correct?
Correct, yep. 100% of the food is donated.
So all of the revenue for to kind of keep it operating all comes from donors? Is that how that works?
Mm-hmm. Yep, exactly. So we have a board of directors, so there's 15 people that sit on the board. They live in the community, and we have an executive director. So they do all of our fundraising. So the board and the ED do all the fundraising. Gaining Ground's been around. I think this is the start of our 26th season. So we survive off about 50% funding from private donors and 50% off of grants. So the board and the ED, do all the solicitation, the raising of the money. So 50% from private donors. Us as farmers, we just get to focus on the farming. We don't have to do any of that. They're raising the money, telling the story, staying in touch with people, bringing people out to the farm. So that's 50% of our operating budget, and the other 50% is our ED is writing grants and applying for special grants. So that's the other 50%. The grants tend to be towards very specific projects. We found that the grants like to fund something. They like to know exactly what they're funding, whether it's to put up a fence, put up a hoop house. So the ED writes grants with that, and she's amazing. She just comes out. She's like, "What do you need? What can I fundraise for?" We create a farm budget each year, go over that together, and she just goes out and gets the money. And it's successful, and it's been pretty amazing. It's allowed us to build 4 hoop houses over the last 5 years, build a barn, get a triple jang seeder, get a paper pot transplanter. So it's really fun to work with her, collaborate with her, to tell her what we need and see her go and get the money. We're constantly doing presentations in the community, explaining what we need, and I love doing it because you get up, you do a 2-minute PowerPoint on a paper pot transplanter. People who've never been on a farm, work in an office, a corporate office or a bank, they just see that and they think it's the most ingenious thing, and why wouldn't they fund that for us when we can clearly explain to them how much time this tool will save us.
Yeah, that's super neat. I would be lying if I didn't say I was a little bit jealous of having a grant writer doing some of that work for you. That's super awesome.
Yeah. I'm certainly blessed with working with them and her and the board.
Yeah, and then being able to share some of that information too, because you've also been doing, you've been working with the Real Food Campaign, doing some bionutrient stuff, and with the NRCS doing some no-till soil health stuff. So can you talk about those studies that you've kind of been a part of?
Yeah, we have been partnered with NOFA Mass, so that's our Northeast Organic Farming Association. The Massachusetts chapter is just incredible. The people running that organization are just doers, shakers. They are just getting stuff done on every level, on the ground, in the State House in Massachusetts, in Washington, D.C. They're just incredible. So, they've asked us, gaining ground because we've been no-till for last 4 years. We've had, yield increases, success, disease reduction, insect reduction. So they actually asked us to participate in 2 different studies right now. One is the CIG study. So this is a conservation and innovation grant. So this is a soil study that NOFA is heading. There's 9 farms throughout New England and the Mid-Atlantic that are of various size and have been in no-till for various amount of times. And the goal is to study these farms over the next 3 years to get data, trying to, looking at the soil in many different ways to show how tilling or not tilling is benefiting the soil. So it's incredible to see, because we just tested at Logan Labs and we were getting our nutrient analysis. Now through NOFA and through this grant, they're sending our soil to Cornell, the CASH test, which is doing carbon sequestration testing, soil respiration, soil aggregation. This is just in year 1, so we're just building a base of all the data, but it's just incredible to see. It's incredible to partner with NOFA and have them send out a soil technician that's doing soil tests on our farm, on this plot that we know is an amazing plot, and then to have those results come back to you from all these labs across the country, Cornell, Logan, UMass soil tests, and just see see the results and try to get a better understanding of what our organic matter is, what our, it's incredible to see. I'm so looking forward to see where the next 3 years go and see the data that they come up with over the next 3 years, and hopefully they have some data to present to start to have some science behind encouraging more people to switch towards this no-till system, and if not, completely transitioning to no-till, to start reducing tillage. And the second grant is through the state, the MDAR and NOFA. So this is correlating healthy soil practices with nutrient quality in crops, specifically carrot, spinach, kale, and lettuce. So for the next 2 years, they are doing a study, studying the harvested crop. So we'll send them in, raw carrot, raw spinach, raw kale, raw chard, and they're testing the nutrient content of those crops compared to the USDA's averages. So for nutrient content, like how much parts per million calcium, potassium, phosphorus, and even the minor nutrients and trace nutrients, to compare those versus the USDA averages across the board, and we're trying to draw a conclusion between soil practices and then the nutrient content of the food, with the same goal in mind to produce some data that says that doing no-till, adding these nutrients makes them more, makes your soil better, which then in turn makes the nutrient quality much higher in the harvested crop. Both of those are in year 1, so we've just got our base this year. We're kind of finishing all the data that we collected over the past year, and year 2 this year will be really interesting to start to compare some of that data versus last year's data.
Yeah, that's cool. I mean, that's one of the advantages for us for-profit farms, is having nonprofit farms who have a little bit more access to, grants, grant writers, those sorts of things, but to be able to get some of that information out there. So to test some of the things that we can't be sure of or don't have time to test, like the nutrient testing and the soil testing. Like I love that there are people working on that, because I think that's really important, to not just say like, oh, I see a difference in my yields and I see a difference in the quality and my customers are happier, but to actually be able to say, and scientifically, this is backed up. I think that's great, and I really appreciate that people are working on that.
Right. I think moving forward, it'll be a great marketing tool for-profit farmers to say, we've tested our carrots, and these carrots have this much higher parts per million nutrients across the board than what the USDA is averaging, or what you'd get at the grocery store.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's super powerful to a customer, because when we talk about all these things like no-till and minimal tillage and all these different, it's really only a bunch of farmers talking to a bunch of farmers about it. As it starts to kind of get out into the public, that's when these questions are really going to become not only important, but they're going to need some, more grounding. So I think that's great. I think that's great work to be doing. Are there other big projects that you're working on that you're super excited about in terms of, different things within that system, like different systems that you're trialing? Is there anything else in there that you're really excited about?
I was almost kind of calling it a year as settling. We've just pushed the envelope so hard for the last 4 years, getting everything into no-till, really refining and documenting every system, everything we do on the farm. And we've almost had a huge project every winter, like installing the fence, installing the irrigation, and then the last 4 years, building a barn, and the last 4 years doing the transition. That we've been, moving mountains over the last 4 years, that we've kind of just wanted to take 2020 and just like settle, take it as a year to like be more observant growers, kind of like see that the whole system is set up now, and kind of find where we can fine tune stuff. So I don't have a super amazing hook of a project to do right now, but we've just grown so much so fast that we kind of want to just step back and really observe and, really focus on the ecological aspect of the farm and start to, manage it holistically, focus on cover crops, hedgerows. So we're thinking it'll be a settle year. We're thinking it'll be a settling year, but you never know. As soon as we get out there, I just get so excited about everything. I always want to push it a little bit harder, but hopefully it's a settle year.
No, I think that's great. I mean, I think that we all, like, as growers, it's tough. Like, it's tough work. So it's fun so a settling year actually can be an exciting thing, a year of, like, stepping back and really refining your systems. One thing we mentioned, you kind of mentioned earlier, was that Rolling Thunder tunnel. And that's the mobile greenhouse. Are those the ones from Rimal?
Rimal, I think I pronounce it Rimal, but I've heard people pronounce it Rimal. But yeah, it's based on, I know Neversink uses them, and I think it's originally an Elliot Coleman design. So this is for a innovation grant that I did in our town here, and they just loved how it rolled. And we could move it and, extend our season of our tomatoes and get greens in early. I have like a love-hate relationship with it, to be honest. It's a bear to move. I love the stationary houses. They're just a little less of a headache. Sometimes you're up at night worrying, like when there's heavy winds in the winter and it's the storm, is like, that thing gonna lift up and fly away? But yeah, it's amazing. I'm so happy to have it and use it, but one is plenty.
Yeah, that's great. I'm glad that you kind of had some, criticism of it, or at least some hesitation with it, because I'm curious to learn a little bit more about it. And in that, is it I guess I've got a couple specific kind of technical questions about it. How is it set up, and what did you have to do to kind of prepare the ground to have a mobile tunnel over it?
Yep. It was a big undertaking. So we had a beautiful spot for it, nice and flat. It was a 3-field block run. So, 3 80-foot sections, 8 beds across, 30 feet wide. Our bed length's 80, so we built the tunnel 88 feet, leaving 4 feet, overhang on each end, so we could still grow in our 80-foot beds. So I think 88 feet was a little long for a tunnel. I think, down at Neversink they have like 50-foot or 50 or 60-foot tunnels. 88's a long tunnel. But we have 3 different plots that it can rotate to. Last year we tried to move it like 6 times, so I think that was too many, so we're reducing it to 4 times this year. Last year we also had a July move because we grew cukes in it, really early cucumbers starting in May that were out by mid-July, and we moved it for an August date. So now we're growing back to tomatoes in it and keeping it in for, the whole summer long session, so we don't have to move it when we're super busy in July. But what we did, so that run, encompasses 3 80-foot fields plus, a 10 feet in between each field, so maybe it's 300 feet long, the whole run. We actually hired an excavator that dug out, we measured 30 feet across, and he dug out 18 inches deep, 18 inches wide, that we then filled with landscape fabric, crushed stone, so that way, the pole that it's on is always clear. There's no weeds growing up on it. It's just, crushed stone underneath it, so it makes the move easier. But yeah, we can move it with 6 of us, the 6 farm crew, but our best time was 3 hours to take it all apart and put it back together. We redesigned the end walls this year, so they come off much easier, much quicker. We had doors. We replaced the doors with basically a roll-up curtain that rolls down vertically and covers the whole front and back. So we can roll up that curtain, and the whole front is basically open, except for the knee wall that would be in the front and back of it. So for taking it apart, it's just removing the knee wall, and then we have cross braces that are bolted onto the ground posts. So then removing the cross braces, making sure those are all lifted up out of the way. We just push it forward to the next site, and the cross braces are just lined up in the exact position that they need be, or ground posts I meant, so that the cross braces line up right to the ground posts, and then we just rebolt those right back onto the ground posts. So it's a big project. Maybe I just have a little bitter taste in my mouth from moving it in July of last year when it was like 95 degrees. But the first year, it was incredible. I mean, we get so much more production out of it. We're starting, spinach and overwintered scallions a month before we would get them in if they were, trying to go in that house following tomatoes. And the first year we had it, we were actually able to keep our tomatoes into Thanksgiving, up until Thanksgiving here in New England, which is a pretty long season for us.
Yeah, that's impressive. We really can't get them much past the beginning of October here, generally, even in a tunnel.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's amazing. So so just so I understand, you have it on one long track all across that gravel.
Yep.
And you have to take off the end walls.
Yep.
And then you push it from behind, no tractor.
Correct. Yep.
Over to the next spot. And then you relock it to whatever the ground posts that you have in there are.
Yep, exactly.
And then you reassemble the end walls. Okay.
Yep. So
yeah, that's good, because on a technical level, I wasn't totally sure how that worked.
Yep, it's pretty simple. The design is amazing, and I know Rimal possibly has been working with Connor at NeverSink, and he's designed a new anchor system. So it's more of a ground anchor than ground posts, and I think those the anchors, have a better weight rating. So you have to it requires less anchors than ground posts. So there's less detaching and reattaching. But I don't really know too much about it. But yeah, 6 people's good. And I said 3 hours, but 4 of those people only come over when we need to actually push it. It's just kind of 2 people working on it at first. And we kind of spread out within the tunnel. So we're standing on the gravel inside the tunnel. We kind of grab onto, our bow sections, and we just run with it. We have a nice little time-lapse video on our social media, Gaining Ground, Instagram, that shows it moving, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, that's great, and I'll definitely make sure to point people in that direction. Well, Doug, thank you so much for your time. This has been a great conversation.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Jesse. I think it's truly amazing, the resource you're becoming for this no-till community.
All right, if you enjoyed that episode, make sure to follow Gaining Ground on Instagram and Facebook and all the places. Also check out gainingground.org. Make sure you are subscribed to this podcast wherever you're getting it and leave a review. But this week, all reviews need to compare this podcast to your Aunt Judy's strawberry strudel, even if you have no Aunt Judy. Yep. Big thanks to Jackson Roulette and Josh Satin. If you haven't subscribed to Josh on YouTube, I would do that. It's got great videos over there. Also, huge thank you to my wife, Hannah, for all she does on our farm, behind the scenes, in life. Amazing woman. Thank you all for listening. We'll see you next week. Bye.
Great, yeah, and I love getting into those nerdy details about stuff, and sometimes I forget to do that, and I always regret it. So I'm glad that we got into the tunnel there at the end.
Yeah, no, that was a good direction. I bet a lot of people are wondering about those. I've gotten a lot of questions from people in the community. They're like, farmers nearby. They're like, "What do you think of that thing? Is it as amazing as it sounds?" And sometimes I'm sure you have it all the time too, like all of us. You're just laying in bed wondering what the hell is happening out there.